All right, so 10 games in the books. I am absolutely bewildered by a game that we'll get to much, much later. One of the most odd, bewildering games I've ever watched in my life. And yet, overall tonight, scoring was decent in most games and pretty well played hockey all around. So if you watched as much as you could, like I did, you were probably quite entertained. Let's start things off with Nashville and Boston. This did not. No. This, again, my problem with Boston has been simple, and I've been saying it for weeks. So I'm going to repeat it now. They are not playing a full 60 minutes. This is becoming a problem. Now, they're in the Atlantic, so the deterioration of their game hasn't been seen as a big deal for the most part. And I know people are going to say, well, they got a point tonight. Yeah, it's their 8th loss after regulation at home, and it's getting kind of ridiculous. First minute, the Bruins get a power play. They were up in shots early, 7-1. Things look pretty good. The Predators get a power play. They got another power play at the 15-minute mark. So Nashville evened things up somewhat by the end of the first. Early in the second, the shots were really evening up. The Bruins get a power play. They don't score, but then Par Lindholm scored while he put himself into the net. From Ritchie and Crowley at 7 minutes and 30 seconds. That's the first time in 8 games that the Predators have allowed the first goal in a game. Nashville's been playing really well. And overall, and I went over the power rankings board tonight, and I did make some adjustments to it. And it's tough, because there are a lot of teams that it feels like should be higher on the board than they are. But there are some teams that have been sneaking up on people. Nashville's one of them. And then Yossi would score from Johansson at 12 minutes and 14 seconds. So I made it a tie game. But before the end of the second on a power play, Bergeron scores from Krug at 19 minutes and 12 seconds. So it's that last-minute goal. It's a go-ahead goal. It's 2-1 Boston going into the third. I should feel confident. I don't. DeBrusk had a shot that went high. Then at the 7:35 mark, Forsberg scores from Johansson and Ekholm. 2-2. Yeah. And that was scored during a delayed penalty. So it was a 6-on-5 goal. Yossi then scored from Sissons 35 seconds later at 8 minutes and 10 seconds. And it kind of ticked me off. And that was when the Bruins call a timeout. Bruce Cassidy having seen enough at that point. And the Predators had really been the better team in the third to that stage. Krug then had a point shot that was stopped. Boston did pressure late. Pasternak scores from Marchand and Krug at 18:55, which tied it. And the funny thing is, as soon as they tied it, I went, crap, they're going to lose in overtime again, aren't they? So it's going to hide the fact that they just keep losing these games. The Bruins nearly scored again in the last minute of that period. And if they'd scored and won at regulation, I probably would have been kind of happy. But again, they haven't played a full 60, and I keep waiting for that. And in overtime, the Bruins got their chances. Pekka Rinne held when he faced them. And then Ellis would score from Johansson and Turris at 4:05, and I knew that was going to be a goal when I saw Marchand pressuring when he shouldn't have been. Marchand going in and pressuring meant it was a 2-on-1 going the other way. And when you see that in overtime, it's probably going in, and it did. So Ellis with the goal. 4-3 is your final in favor of the Nashville Predators. Rinne saves 29 out of 32, played very well. Halak saved 25 out of 29. He played well enough, but again, we'll see if his numbers start to go up now. Yossi, Ellis, and Bergeron are your 3 stars. Power plays, Nashville went 0 for 3. Boston went 1 for 4. Shots were 11-8 in the first period in favor of the Bruins. 11-8 in the second in favor of Nashville. 11-7 Bruins in the third. In the overtime, the shots were 3-2 in favor of Nashville. Your final shots, 32-29 in favor of the Bruins. And it's another frustrating result. If you're a Bruins fan, if you're a Nashville fan, they've had a tremendous road trip. This has been great. This has been exactly what the doctor ordered for the Nashville Predators. And now it's a matter of trying to build on that after we get through the Christmas break and all that. I think they have 1 game left on Monday, and then it's Christmas break. And they have to be pretty happy right now. And for Boston, get it together. This is starting to really drive me nuts. Really, really driving me nuts. Next up, Toronto. The Akbar magnet's not happy with me. It's glaring at me. Don't look directly at it. It's not happy with me. This trap game started out as a trap game, and then there was like an angel that looked after this game. A miracle in the sky, as it were. The Wings were up 4-0 in shots at 2.5 minutes in, and they mentioned that Jonathan Bernier had a 3-0-1 career record against the Leafs. That's not good. So they have more shots due to Detroit, and they have a goaltender that's never lost in regulation against Toronto. However, the Leafs got a power play, and Pickard replaced Bernier, so there was some speculation about whether or not he pulled something or whether he felt ill. Whatever it was, Pickard went in. And as soon as Pickard went in, I went, right, so the Akbar Magnet's kind of in trouble now. It's not really a trap game if Pickard's playing. Fans were cheering all of Hutchinson's saves, and to Toronto fans that cheered for Michael Hutchinson, thank you. In this day and age where everybody's so cynical, and it's easy for fans to say this guy isn't good enough, and we don't want this guy as our goaltender, kudos to Toronto fans for rallying around a goaltender that's kind of been beaten down over the last couple of months. Mikheyev then hit a post before the end of the first, but it's scoreless after one. Second period, Tavares missed a really good chance wide. Tavares, he's having his struggles. He really is. And when I'm hearing things like, well, he's not getting points, but that's when the excuses are out. At the amount of money he's making right now, he needs to be scoring points. Hutchinson then stopped Glendening. There was an extended 4-on-4 play at the half, which I thought would have favored Toronto, although Detroit does have its share of speed as well. Hyman then had a break that led to a power play, so they had to hold him up, and there was some debate about whether or not it was a goal. So instead of a power play, it's a goal. Yeah, when they looked at it on the replay, they're like, yeah, so the penalty, don't worry about it because that puck went in the net. Hyman, it's an own goal. Detroit player kicked it into his own net, but it was definitely in the net before the net went off. Hyman gets the goal from Riley at 17:09. And that's the kind of break Toronto has needed. That during their tough times over the last couple of months, they really haven't had those breaks. They got one of those tonight. The Wings had a power play in the last minute. They would not score on it. In the third period, the Leafs get a power play. They do score on theirs. It is Austin Matthews from Tavares and Marner at 2 minutes and 18 seconds. And as soon as it was 2-0, I'm like, okay, so this is done. Detroit's not coming back from 2 goals down in the third period, not with the kind of scoring they have. Hyman scores from Matthews at 8:51. Matthews would score from Marner and Hyman at 13:39, and then there's only one question left. Can Michael Hutchinson get a shutout in his first victory of the year? No. Bertuzzi would score on a power play from Athanasiou and Fabry at 18:16 because you can't have nice things, and Hutchinson can't have a shutout, and your final score is 4-1 for Toronto. Back-to-back games. They win the second half of a back-to-back, and they do it with Hutchinson in net. He saved 29 out of 30 shots. Now, people are going to say, well, it's just Detroit. Who cares? For a goaltender's confidence, this is huge. With the GM looking over his shoulder, and it'd be a shame if we had to get rid of you, but if you don't have a good game, so he had a good game. Pickard ended up coming in and saving 16 out of 20 after Bernier had saved all 3 shots he faced. Your 3 stars are Hutchinson, Hyman, and Matthews. Shots were 10 apiece in the first period, 13-6 for Detroit in the second, and 7-7 in the third. Final shots 30-23 in favor of the Wings. Power plays, Detroit goes 1 for 2, Toronto goes 1 for 4, and they survived the Akbar Magnet without a whole lot of trouble. It's not a big deal. Trap game. This isn't a trap game. We're struggling to keep ourselves in the playoffs, so this isn't a trap game. We need to get in there and make sure that everybody knows Toronto's good enough to be in the playoffs. That's where they were at today, and they did a pretty good job. All right, next up, Philadelphia. These guys went into Ottawa tonight, and they got a lead, and then they flirted with losing, and then they didn't. But for Ottawa, this is another one of those games. Ottawa doesn't give up. They work really hard. They outwork everybody. First period, there was an early power play for the Flyers. They would score on it. Hayes gets the power play goal from Voracek and Elliott at 3 minutes and 16 seconds. So Hayes on the board, that would be his 1 point of the night, and that's good news for him. The Sens got a power play around the half, but their power play generally sucks, although it's starting to show signs of life, so I have to say generally, because it's starting to get better. The Senators got another power play late. The one thing I've noticed with their power play over the last couple of weeks is that it's setting up early, and they're distributing the puck well. So when it was ice cold and at like 8% or 7% or wherever it was, they weren't setting up until there was like 20 seconds left in the power play. Now they seem to have more structure, and they're doing better to get that power play running right off the bat. Both teams were getting a ton of shots in that first period. They kind of got all their shots in the first period. Second period, Van Riemsdyk scores at 1:03, and it went off Golubev's skate. And Golubev kind of told Hogberg, sorry about that. Hogberg, being a rookie goaltender, highly unlikely he'd be upset with him, just kind of like, these things happen. But Van Riemsdyk gets the goal. The Senators pushed it around the 5-minute mark, and that would be fruitful. First, it's Ennis from England and White at 6 minutes, and then 25 seconds later, Mark Borokop, gets his 4th of the year. That's a new career high. 4 goals in a season. We got a sniper in our hands. Brandstrom and Ennis with the assists on that at 6:25. So all of a sudden it's 2-2. The Flyers get a power play, and then Duclair drew a Senators power play. So Duclair with some pretty good play in front of the net forces the Flyers to hold him up and take a penalty. Duclair would then score a power play goal at 18:21. That's the 21st of his career. He has just set a career high in goals. Again, be interesting to see what he gets in the offseason in terms of money, because he's at 21 goals and we're not halfway through the year yet. So even if he slows down, you got to figure he'll get at least 30. What's the 30-goal scorer worth? We'll find out in the offseason. Voracek gets a goal from Pitlick and Frost at 19:12, so it's one of those dreaded last-minute goals. And it ties up the game again, so Philly is still in this. Third period, and again, at around the 1-minute mark, at 1:10 actually, it's Van Riemsdyk from Aube-Kubel. So it's 4-3 in favor of Philadelphia. They get another lead. The Flyers got a power play. They wouldn't score on it. And then Ennis would get his 2nd of the night. He ends up with 3 points tonight. Duclair and Borowiecki get the assist. So Borowiecki, he's up to 14 points now. He's on pace for about 30 points. The guy's an offensive dynamo. Let's be honest. Borowiecki's been hiding this his whole career. That's a 10-17. The Flyers got a late power play. They wouldn't score on it. In overtime, Hogberg was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic, and he's the reason this goes to a shootout. In the shootout, Couturier ends up getting the winner. So the Flyers go into Ottawa, and they win it 5-4 in a shootout. Elliott saved 30 out of 34. Hogberg saved 34 out of 38. Played really, really well. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with this kid, because honestly, I think he's played well enough now in limited appearances. I don't know. I don't know what Ottawa does from here. Do you call around and see if Craig Anderson, if there might be a market for Craig Anderson? Maybe you go with Nilsson and Hogberg. Maybe you can find somebody who take Anderson as a rental. Maybe Anderson can be talked into that. It'll be interesting. And I know Anderson is a hero in the city of Ottawa and all of this stuff. But again, if you're Pierre Dorian, you got to think about it. All right, 3 stars are Van Riemsdyk, Ennis, and Voracek. You might actually get more for Nilsson, although do the Ottawa Senators want to keep Nilsson long term? So yeah, Van Riemsdyk, Ennis, and Voracek are your 3 stars. Power plays, Philadelphia goes 1 for 5. Ottawa goes 1 for 4, as their power play didn't suck tonight. Shots were 17-15 for Ottawa in the first period. I said they got all their shots in the first. Both teams had 8 shots in the second and enjoyed it so much they both got 8 shots in the third. In the overtime, the shots were 7-1 for Philadelphia. 7 shots for Philadelphia. Ottawa was just holding on, and Hogberg was making fantastic saves. Final shots 38-34 in favor of the Flyers. Hogberg was great. Yeah, we'll see what happens with the Senators from here, I should say. All right, moving along. Tampa and Washington, and this is one of those games where I'm really at the point now where Tampa's in trouble. Games in hand, it doesn't really matter. They are sitting well out of a playoff spot right now, in my eyes, because there's too many teams to jump over. Now, the funny thing is, if they were in the Metro, we'd be talking about them being done. But because they're in the Atlantic, we're not. Now, the Caps got a power play early in this one, and at around 8 minutes, the Bolts get a power play of their own. The Caps get a power play late. It was kind of a special teams game in that first 20 minutes of it. And Tampa would have quite the night when it comes to power plays, as it was a solid game for McElhinney in the first, and the Bolts got another power play in the last minute of that first period. So there was no shortage of chances for Tampa Bay in this one. Just finishing was a problem. In the second period, Gudas would score from Eller and Siegenthaler at 4:40. I'm sure everybody expected those 3 guys to get on the board with a goal altogether, right? And they mentioned that Kucherov was at 199 goals, 299 assists, 498 points. Interesting note. I thought I'd throw that up there. Oshie got hurt in a collision. I'm pretty sure he stayed in the game, though. And when I saw it, I was kind of like, it's Oshie. He gets hurt in collisions. It's kind of what he does. It's his thing. It's his MO. But there was only 7 shots for Tampa Bay in the first half of the game. 7. This is the Tampa Bay Lightning. There's no reason to only have 7 shots in the first 30 minutes. I know Washington's good defensively, but that's insane. And for John Cooper, I'm starting to think he might be the next coach that ends up going. The Bolts got another power play later on. They had a lot. Third period, the Caps were more than doubling Tampa Bay in shots. So Tampa Bay has all this time on the power play, and yet Washington's the one getting all the shots. Power play for the Caps, they wouldn't score, and then Kucherov would tie the game from point and Palat at 10 minutes exactly. So at 10 minutes, we've got ourselves a tie game in the third period, and we'll see if Tampa can pull this out. The Bolts get a power play. They then get an extended 5-on-3. Like I said, there was no shortage of chances. They don't score on any of it. And I really think Tampa Bay, it's becoming a very frustrating pattern for these guys. Holtby made some saves during that 5-on-3. Tampa Bay took a timeout with 11 seconds left in the 5-on-3. I was on the fence about this. When you do that, you're also letting the penalty killers, those 3 guys, rest up, and you're allowing the coach to make sure his top 3 guys are set to go out there again. So I thought it was iffy planning. I understand it, but it's kind of iffy planning. I know they needed a goal. They wouldn't get it. And then Orlov would score from Vrana and Kuznetsov at 13:57. As soon as that went in, I was like, and Tampa's done. Kucherov had a tip that was stopped by Holtby. The Bolts went back to the power play again and pulled the goalie to go 6-on-4, which allowed Nick Dowd to hit the empty net. That's a shorthanded goal. It's an empty netter at 17:37. And that's your game. 3-1's your final. McElhinney saves 32 out of 34. Holtby saved 26 out of 27. 3 stars are Orlov, Holtby, and McElhinney. Power plays. Tampa went 0 for 7. That's your storyline. That's it right there. Tampa Bay had 7 power plays. 7 and got nothing. Bupkis, 0 out of it. Washington went 0 for 3. But they could score 5-on-5 as well. And they only had 3 power plays. If they had 7, I'm pretty sure they would have at least got 1. Shots were 13-6 for Washington in the first, 16-7 for Washington in the second, 14-6 for Tampa in the third. Final shots 35-27. Tampa did wake up, but then they found Holtby waiting for him. So we'll see what happens with Tampa from here. But I'm starting to lose faith that Tampa Bay is going to turn this around. It's taken a while, but I'm starting to think that run I'm waiting for, I don't think it's there. That being said, I need to change sports. You can tell when I've been watching hockey all day because I get 7 Nation Army stuck in my head. They play it at every game. I really enjoy the song. The thing that I don't understand is why do you just play the beat and not actually play the song? The song's fantastic. Some buildings play the song, but most of them is just that beat and the bass line. It's a great song in and of itself. 7 Nation Army is a great song. But next up is Florida in against Carolina. Yeah, I got 7 Nation Army stuck in my head. Now you do too. You're welcome. Now, this was a game that early on you're saying, well, Carolina's got a good chance. They got Mrazek in net. He denied Matheson. Really nice break for Matheson too. Ekblad then took a puck in the wrist. He would stay in the game. But puck in the wrist, that's kind of scary stuff. Dadonov scores from Boyle at 7:07. It was on a breakaway for Dadonov. Almost said Davidov. I'm like, that's not Davidov. Davidov's from many years ago. Dadonov is now. The Panthers pressed after that to try to add to their lead. They didn't. We come out of the first period with a 1-0 lead for Florida. The Canes started the second period on a power play that had started about 30 seconds left in the first. Mrazek stopped Sevier shorthanded. Panthers would get a power play, and it was lethal. Boyle scores from Ekblad and Connolly at 11:34. So Boyle with a goal and an assist to that point in the game. The Panthers got another power play. They wouldn't score on that one. However, in the third, that power play bled over. It turns into a 5-on-3. Shortly after the 5-on-3 ended, Huberdeau scores from Barkov at 26 seconds. So 26 seconds of power play goal. And it's 3-0. Canes got a power play shortly thereafter. They wouldn't score on that one. Teravainen, though, would get the Carolina Hurricanes on the board from Hamilton and Aho at 9:16. And if you've watched Florida this year, you know it's kind of dangerous when they've got a lead like this. They are known for losing leads, although it gets a lot more rare as we get further into the season, this whole blown leads thing that we saw early. Achari would get another one. That's 7 goals in 3 games for Achari from Huberdeau and Yandel at 10:41. He scored more goals in the last 3 games than I think he had all last year. I don't know that for sure. But it's insane. He's scoring a lot. The Canes would get a power play. They would score on it. Walmart scores from Niederreiter and Netches at 12:59. And as much as they pressed, and they did, the Florida goaltender Drieger, he's pretty good. Drieger's a pretty good goaltender. So when a goaltender allows 2 goals in 1 period, and you still go, he had a pretty good game, that tells you just how many shots Drieger was facing. Drieger faced 44, and he saved 42 of them in the 4-2 victory. Mrazek saved 18 out of 22. So, again, part of my issue with Carolina in general, I'm not fully on board with their goaltending tandem. And it's a night like tonight that makes me concerned. Drieger's your number 1 star, Boyle's number 2, and Niederreiter's number 3. Power plays, Florida goes 2 for 3. Carolina goes 1 for 3. The shots favored Carolina more and more as the game went along, it would seem. 13-9 in the first, 11-8 in the second, and then 20-5 in the third period to get to a 44-22 doubling of the shots in favor of Carolina, the team that loses 4-2. So frustrating loss at home for Florida. Big win. Big win as they're suddenly the better team in Florida. I don't think we can argue that too much right now, that Florida's having a better run than Tampa Bay. Who knows how long that can last, but that's got to feel like a pretty good Christmas present for Florida fans. All right, next up, Columbus. Yes, the Blue Jackets at home against the New Jersey Devils. And they didn't waste any time. Bjorkstrand from Jenner and Jones at 26 seconds. The Devils got a power play. Then they got another power play. Devils' power play sucks. Now that Ottawa's power play seems to be waking up, the Devils' power play still sucks. Bjorkstrand would get another from Dubois and Kukin at 8:06. The Devils got a power play around the 15-minute mark. Butcher would end up scoring from Zaka and Vatanen at 15:28. I believe that was during a 4-on-4. But you know, for the Devils, this is at the very least, it's a 2-1 game going into the second. So there's some optimism there, I guess. There was a strong Columbus Blue Jackets game for that first half, though. The shots were heavily in their favor, and it was a pretty decent effort from them. Gavrikov would score from Robinson and Texier at 13:13. That made it 3-1. This was the game that, of the ones that started at 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific, and everything I've reviewed so far did. This was the one that I knew I didn't have to pay a whole lot of attention to out of the 6. Because I had a feeling right when Columbus scored early, I'm like, oh, it's that game, sadly. The shots were 3-1 Columbus at around the 4-minute mark. They got a power play. The Devils did get a power play late. And then you do what you do when it's late. You pull the goaltender, you're down by 2. And Columbus took advantage. Werenski scores from Jones and Jenner at 17:08. They pulled the goalie again, went down 4-1. Nyquist would score at 18:48, so that's 2 empty netters to turn the score to 5-1 instead of 3-1. But lost in all of this is that Sen played tonight, and he saved 35 out of 38. So not bad numbers for a goaltender getting thrown in there. That at the start of the year, almost nobody who wasn't a Devils fan would have had any clue who he was. Korpisalo, 21 saves on 22 shots. He's usually pretty good when Columbus wins. Your 3 stars are Bjorkstrand, Gavrikov, and Korpisalo. 0 for 3 on the power play for New Jersey. 0 for 5 for Columbus. The shots favored Columbus the whole game. 11-8 in the first, 14-9 in the second, and then 15-5 in the third period. So New Jersey in that third period really just overwhelmed by Columbus. Final shots 40-22. So much like this game here, almost double the shots, and yet in this one, the team that gets double the shots actually wins the game. Not that Sen was any worse than Drieger. We got some names on the board here that we would not have expected at the start of the year in goal, don't we? I think that's exciting. I like seeing new names in net. I like seeing rookie goaltenders. I think that makes things a lot more unpredictable. because you don't really have an idea for what that goaltender is. So hopefully it's a trend that continues. Maybe we'll start seeing goaltenders getting younger like we've seen skaters getting younger for the last few years. The average age of a goaltender coming down. That being said, Columbus escapes a potential trap game with New Jersey, and for New Jersey, it's back to where it was. Those back-to-back wins felt pretty good, but they're back to where they started. Next up, Montreal. I'm impressed by the Habs. I'm impressed by their resilience. I am. And tonight's game against Edmonton can't lose them all. And tonight, Edmonton had a certain drive and determination that was better than what I've seen from them in a lot of their games lately. It starts early. Draisaitl scores from McDavid at 1:30. So right away, Edmonton's up. And this is shortly before we start hearing dueling chants between the fans of let's go Habs, let's go Oilers. And I love that. I said that was going to happen. It happened. Enjoy that. Lot of Habs fans in the crowd tonight who may have left not very happy with how this turned out. The Oilers got a power play. They wouldn't score on it, but Archibald would score from Bear. Archibald had a pretty good game. That's at 11:51, but not long after, they get a power play. During that power play, Petrie gets a shorthanded goal at 14:19. So it's 2-1, and then Gallagher was pushing for the tie after that, so Montreal doesn't give up. Second period, the Habs get a power play. They would score on it. Danault from Petrie and Suzuki at 8:29. Suzuki continues his under-the-radar development, and his points are still showing up. And for Petrie, that was an assist to go with the goal he had, and it wouldn't be the last time he showed up on the score sheet tonight. So that made it 2-2. Kassian and Sherratt then had a fight. Kassian was looking for somebody to go with and figured Sherratt will go with me, and Sherratt said, sure. So the fight was on as Kassian was trying to stem the tide of this Montreal comeback. The Habs were definitely showing some resilience. The Oilers got a power play they wouldn't score on, but McDavid would score from Draisaitl and Nugent-Hopkins at 15 minutes and 40 seconds. And, yeah, that was a nice one. Third period, Domi would score from Lehkonen and Petrie at 1:09. So this is what Montreal did a lot early in the year. And it shows up here. Early goal. And so they tied the game up. The Oilers got a power play. Sheahan would end up scoring from Archibald at 7:48. So Archibald, not known as a scorer of any sort, he gets himself on the board for his second point of the night. And Sheahan, that's his second goal in 2 games. So they scored on a 2-on-1. Nice give-and-go play. And it ends up in the back of the net. The Oilers get a power play. Habs would end up pulling the goaltender towards the end of the game without being able to get that tying goal. The Oilers win 4-3 over the Montreal Canadiens. Price saved 22 out of 26 in the loss. Koskinen saves 23 out of 26 in the win. Power plays 1-for-1 for Montreal, 1-for-5 for the Oilers. Shots 15-9 in favor of Edmonton in the first, 10-3 in favor of Montreal in the second. Not a really strong second period for Edmonton, but in only having 3 shots, they did get a goal. So that's important. And then in the third, 8-7 were the shots for the Oilers. Final shots 26-26. Very entertaining game. And the Oilers kind of stopped the bleeding a little bit on this pretty poor streak they've had going for weeks now. We'll see whether or not they can continue the upswing, and we'll see whether or not Montreal can continue theirs as well, as the Atlantic Division seems to be getting more and more hotly contested from week to week. But yeah, that was a pretty good game between 2 Canadian teams that hopefully we see against each other again. I think Edmonton's already gone to Montreal. I'm not sure. It doesn't matter right now. Doesn't matter tonight. All right, Chicago went into Colorado tonight and laid down a shocker. This was the most surprising result of the night. And it is an example of how you got to be careful with Taves and Kane. Even now. So for people who say, Taves is over the hill. Not tonight he wasn't. No, he was out there running and gunning tonight. Now in the first, the Avs get a power play shortly thereafter. Graves would score from Donskoy and Jost. And at 6:01, this feels like it's going to be the same as every other Colorado-Chicago game. Colorado's just the better team. The shots were 9-4 Avs at around the 15-minute mark. Nichushkin nearly got one. The Avs had a goal from McKinnon that was waved off for a kicking motion. They didn't challenge it either. There were a few goals tonight where you could see the coach was like, I'd like to challenge it, but I don't want to get a penalty for being wrong. There were 2 or 3 different goals tonight that I could see. You could see the coaches wanted to challenge and just, I'm not taking a penalty. Second period, 21 seconds. Taves from Kane. They really put the team on their back today and said, all right, we're doing this. The early goal quieted the crowd until Calvert scored from Jost and Graves at 2:40. So it feels like, okay, never mind, Colorado's back. Rantanen then almost made it 3-1. Pretty darn close, but didn't. The Hawks got a power play. Boquist had a shot that was just kicked wide by Grubauer. Highmore had a breakaway that was denied by Grubauer, and Highmore was not happy with himself that one didn't go in. And then Gilbert and Landeskog had a fight. Gabriel Landeskog, tough customer. So is Gilbert. Gilbert's a pretty tough customer as well. Hitting was definitely ramping up as this game went along. These teams don't like each other. We know this. It's no surprise. The Hawks got a power play. Calvert would end up scoring after that from Cole and Belmar at 1909. So that's one of those key goals. Last minute of the period. And now it makes it a 2-goal lead going to the third. No problem, right? Chicago has not been a problem for Colorado all year. This is the 4th and final meeting. The Avs were playing solid, protecting the lead. Nichushkin had another charge in towards the net tonight. I thought he looked pretty good out there. He doesn't get on the board, but I thought he played pretty well. The Avs get a power play, but Kampf had a pretty good chance shorthanded. And you could see that the momentum in this game was potentially ready to swing. Leonard had a fantastic save that held it at 3-1, and then another. And I remember thinking in that moment, it's too bad Leonard's going to take the loss tonight because he's been pretty good. Kane scores from Kubalik and Taves at 11:22. 28 seconds later, Kirby Dach from Gustafsson and Taves. So at 11:50, it's tied. Chicago gets a power play. They don't score on it, but the momentum is all in their favor. The wind's at their backs. Kubalik scores from Kane and Taves at 16:43. And a raucous Colorado crowd is silenced. Leonard robbed Eric Johnson, or EJ, as the Altitude Network was calling him every time he touched the puck. EJ took the shot. Leonard said nope. And all of a sudden, those great saves he was making when they were down 3-1 seemed really, really important, right? They pulled the goalie, did Colorado with 1 minute and 51 seconds left, and Murphy said fine. He hits the empty net at 19:21. Chicago wins 5-3. Chicago is slowly climbing their way out of this hole they've been in for most of the season. They win the game 5-3, and Leonard saves 28 out of 31. Grubauer saves 27 out of 31. 3 stars are Taves, Calvert, and Kane. Power plays, both teams went 0-for-3 on the power play. Shots were 12-6 in the first in favor of Colorado, 15-10 in favor of Chicago in the second, and then in the third, 11-9 Chicago. Final shots, 32-31 for Chicago. Never count them out. Don't. This is why Colorado beating them down the way they did the first 3 games looks so smart, because if you give them a chance, you give them a window, and especially if you've got a coach that says, you know what, I'm going to put Kane and Taves together and you guys just go out there and have fun. They did tonight, and that was the end result. That being said, I need to change boards one last time. If you watched a game tonight where you went, what's happening? And you asked yourself that multiple times, you likely watched the Vancouver Canucks and the Pittsburgh Penguins. Highly likely that's the game you watched. The Vancouver Canucks came out tonight, and I don't think they played very well. This is the weird thing. I don't think they played very well, but they get 2 points, so I can't penalize them for it. I think Pittsburgh outplayed them, but they lost. And this is where, if you're a Penguins fan and you want to shake your fist in the air about Matt Murray, now's probably a good time. This was a bizarre game. So the Tanev brothers are against each other, and Louis Eriksson's in for Levo, so it kind of feels like this could be a bad night for Vancouver. Eriksson played all right. Not fantastic, doesn't get on the board, but he played okay. And Brandon Tanev would take a couple of penalties tonight. Now, there were no shots in the first 5 minutes. I felt that was newsworthy. 7 minutes in, no shots. 9 minutes in, you guys know where I'm going with this, right? No shots. 10 minutes. So, the theory goes like this. Before this game, both Mike Sullivan, and Coach Green in Vancouver say, all right, guys, we had this horrible game in Pittsburgh where it just got out of control and ended up 8-6. Defense first. Go out there and shut them down. They shut themselves down. It would be 10 minutes and 23 seconds before the first shot on goal was taken. That was by the Vancouver Canucks. And the crowd cheered like it was a goal. Because I can imagine the price for the tickets to this game, they were astronomical. The prices were really high by Vancouver standards. I looked through at the start of the year. I looked through all the tickets. Saturday night games are more expensive than other ones, anyways. Price for these tickets was ridiculous. The seat that I sat in for the Vegas game, which is like, I don't know, $65-$70 I paid for the tickets. For this one, it was like $200. I'm like, no. It was somewhere around there, anyways. Now, the Canucks then get a 4-minute power play, and this is where the game kind of turns. The Penguins take another penalty, which turned it into a 5-on-3 for 2 minutes. The chances on the 5-on-3 were pretty good. It took 1 minute and 39 seconds for a goal that would come back because of an offside. As soon as JT Miller's goal went in, the Penguins immediately challenged for offside. They knew. They knew the play was offside. Somebody called down and said, the play right now is offside. If they score, just call it off. So that took that goal away. But then the Penguins took another penalty. And I was like, wait, they're already down 5-on-3. You can't go 5-on-2. This is strange. And I was trying to think during this season if I've seen this at all. And I'm pretty sure I haven't seen it where a team's down 5-on-3 and they take another penalty. And the funny thing is, the power play was thrown off by that denied goal. They didn't play very well, and then they would score. Virtanen scores from Myers and Roussel at 15 minutes and 10 seconds. That's the 10th goal of the season for Virtanen. So again, for people who want to talk about Virtanen sucks, he's on pace for about 50 points. He's on pace for about 25 goals this year. That's not bad. So I am fully on board with Jake Virtanen, and I think he has developed, and it reminds me of that video I made in my old house in the backyard where I was talking about Virtanen and how I still felt that he could break through offensively. People told me I was crazy. He's nothing. They'd be better off just to trade him. He sucks. He doesn't. And he threw a lot of hits tonight, too. Now, Miller would score 1 minute and 50 seconds later from Fantenberg and Tanev during these many, many penalties that Pittsburgh was taking. So that's 2 power play goals, make it 2-0. And the Penguins had 0 shots at that stage of the period. None. 0. The Canucks only had 5 in that period. There was a last-minute power play for the Penguins. They wouldn't get a shot during that power play in the last minute. And then there was a Jay Beagle and Chris Letang exchanged greetings at the end of the first period, I am sure, to inquire about who was going to host Christmas dinner at whose house. I'm sure that's what it was about. Second period, the Penguins got 2 shots on the power play in the first minute, which bring the crowd to their feet. Hey, Pittsburgh finally got shots. But they pushed by the 6.5-minute mark. They're pushing pretty good. And they had the lead in shots for the entire game by the halfway mark of that period. And they would just keep pushing. Markstrom robbed Gensel. Gaudette then takes a double minor. So now it's the Canucks' turn to take a double minor. As the second half of the double minor started, Gensel would score from McCann and Malkin at 15:28. So that's a power play goal, and it ends the power play. The interesting thing is, Jake Gensel in his career, he scored more goals against Vancouver than any other team, even though he doesn't play them as much as all the other teams in the league. He barely plays them at all, but when he plays them, he loves playing them. But it doesn't stay a 1-goal game for long. Pettersson scores from Myers and Miller at 16:12. And it's 3-1. But the Penguins got a power play in that last minute. So they were in this. That goal by Pettersson was really kind of a nail in the coffin kind of thing. But in the third, Gensel drew a Canucks power play, or Canucks penalty, I should say. And he had a really good game. So Jake Gensel doesn't get a star because of the final score, but he did have a good game. And the Penguins had control since the first period. This was all Pittsburgh. Score doesn't show it. The Canucks got a power play. They wouldn't score on it. However, Besser would get a goal from Pettersson at 14:31. That's Besser's 13th on the season. He's on pace for about 30 goals. That's not bad. and he's on pace as well for about 70 points. Again, not bad. And there are plenty of people, who want to say that Besser this and Besser that. He's having a pretty good year. They pull the goalie with 4 minutes left. Didn't matter. They weren't scoring 3 times. The amazing thing in those last couple of minutes of action was how well the Canucks were shot blocking. Horvat throwing his body in front of pucks. Miller, this was great. Myers was throwing his body in front of pucks as well. And Myers had a couple of assists tonight as well. So Tyler Myers, after a rough game against Vegas, made up for it tonight. Shots, Murray saved 10 out of 14 in the loss. Markstrom saves 28 out of 29 in the win. Your 3 stars are Miller, Pettersson, and Markstrom in this 4-1 victory for Vancouver. Power plays, Pittsburgh 1 for 5, Vancouver 2 for 5. The shots were 5-0 for Vancouver in the first. This was a weird game. And then they were 20-6 in favor of Pittsburgh in the second. And then it was 9-3 Pittsburgh in the third. I don't know what I watched here. The final shots were 29-14 in favor of Pittsburgh. This is the weirdest game I've watched the Canucks this year. They got 14 shots and they won 4-1. I don't know. They didn't play particularly well, but they won the game. So I can't really complain too much. And now they got a game against the Oilers on Monday, which kind of sort of means something. So for Vancouver, they're trying to claw their way back into a playoff spot. They're not there yet, but they're trying. And I admire the effort. So yeah, that was a strange game. All right, last game of the night. Not nearly as strange. The Sharks, they have a pattern. The Sharks have a pattern. They get up 7-1 in shots around the halfway mark. Solid start for Jake Allen, and I thought, I know where this is going, because Martin Jones was in net. And they've worked with Jones for over a week. There's some questions to be asked about Jones right now. The Sharks were limiting the shots against. They get a last-minute power play, and in the second period with the rollover of that power play, they would score. Burns from Karlsson. At 24 seconds, the lead doesn't last. Kyrou gets a goal at 2 minutes and 4 seconds. So that's one of those moments where you're like, we could use a save from Jones there. Schwartz then scores on the power play from Shen and Perron at 5 minutes and 30 seconds. So San Jose's power play, which has shown some cracks over the last couple of weeks, it had one tonight as well. And these are starting to add up. And again, the Sharks are ahead in shots, but they're behind on the scoreboard. It has to be very frustrating for the players on the bench. Whether you love Martin Jones or not, as a player, it has to be frustrating to look up and go, we've outshot them by about 3-1 and we're down. We've outshot them by 2-1 and we're down. It has to get frustrating at some point. Then Nason scores from Dillon and Burns at 15:36. So picked up on waivers. Stefan Nason with a goal. And it's 2-2 after 2. Third period, the Blues were generating shots. The shots were 3-0 at 7 minutes, so they were definitely more in control than San Jose. And then Pietrangelo would score from Schwartz and Shen at 11:07. And that just... See, and the thing is, it was a nice shot by Pietrangelo. I can't say anything about how, you got to stop that, but that's where you need a save from Jones. That's where you need a save from Martin Jones that's just spectacular. Those highlight reel saves. He's had some games where he does that, but more often than not this year, he's had a save percentage below 900. There's been at least one goal in a game where you think he may have been a little bit out of position, maybe came out too far, maybe not far enough. And just, it leaves you questioning in your mind, like, we needed that save there, and it really felt like San Jose needed that. And the fans, before that goal went in, had wanted a power play, because Barbashev was holding a stick of one of the San Jose players. It escapes me which player it was. It was clearly holding the stick, but it was also, I guess, kind of borderline. He didn't hold on to it for very long. And again, I know if you're a San Jose fan, that's going to sound weak, but this is kind of what I talked about in that News of the Day video about officiating. That's not the kind of penalty you get in the third. You would get that penalty in the first. So, again, that comes into question, right? And when it's a 3-2 game like this, a referee doesn't want to decide the game, but you kind of do if you're letting that go and then a goal goes in at the other end. So I understand if San Jose fans are upset. They were upset in the building, and it just hurt. The Blues were pushing for another after that one. It was a great third for them overall. They were up 11-5 in shots at 14 minutes and 45 seconds into the third, just showing their dominance over the Sharks in the third period. There was a late power play for the Sharks. They did call a timeout with 1:24 left when they finally pulled Jones out of the game. which the announcers were talking about whether or not they should have pulled Jones earlier. So when they had the power play, do you go 6-on-4 earlier or do you wait? I can kind of see both points of view. The way that it works now with the whole analytics thing, you're supposed to pull them earlier. So they didn't. And when they did, it shows why pulling the goalie is dangerous. O'Reilly would score from Falk. That's a shorthanded goal into an empty net at 18:52. And then just the icing on the cake, when they're down by 2, they're not going to score 2. But Pietrangelo would hit the empty net at 19:52. So Pietrangelo comes out of tonight with a couple of goals. O'Reilly gets on the board with his first goal, and I think they said it was 10 games. But, they all count. And 5-2 is your final score in favor of St. Louis. So another frustrating result for San Jose tonight. Allen, 34 saves on 36 shots. I'm not sure if I've said this enough, but I'll say it again, just in case people at the back haven't heard me. Jake Allen is having an excellent season. He's playing very well on the road. St. Louis is even more dangerous right now than I think they were going to the playoffs last year because both goalies are playing really, really well. And it's kind of scary if it keeps up this way. This means you have a rested Jordan Binnington going into the playoffs this year and a St. Louis team that could have home ice right from the get-go. They could be dangerous. Jones, 23 saves on 26 shots in the loss. Your 3 stars are Schwartz, Pietrangelo, and Allen. And again, I don't want to throw all kinds of shade at Jones and talk about how awful he is, because I don't believe he is. I think he's a pretty good goaltender. He's just had some poor numbers this year. But there have been moments in a game where you're thinking, man, the timing of that goal, the angle of that goal, just the feeling from that goal, it's one where San Jose needs that save. They need that big emotional save, and Jones just hasn't done that often enough this year. And I wonder how long it's going to be before Doug Wilson makes a move, which might benefit both the Sharks and potentially Jones if it involved trading him. So we'll see. Power plays, 1 for 2 for St. Louis, 1 for 3 for San Jose. Your shots are 15-6 San Jose in the first, 13-9 San Jose in the second, and then 12-8 for St. Louis in the third. They understood they had a chance to steal it, went for the jugular in the third period. Final shots, 36-27 in favor of the Sharks. What did this do to the picture for the playoffs? Not a lot. We still have the Capitals against the Flyers if the playoffs started today. The Islanders and the Penguins, which is a rematch of last year. Boston and Carolina. And then Toronto would have home ice against Florida. Toronto has jumped back to second in that division. Tied with Florida, however, is Buffalo. 1 point behind Florida is Montreal. 4 points behind Florida is Tampa. So again, Tampa's getting further out. 7 points behind Philly is Columbus, who've jumped past the Rangers, who are 9 points out of the playoffs right now. So the Rangers are on that dire. Like I've said before, if you're double digits out of the playoffs, that's very often curtains for a team. So they're 9 points back right now because their division is crazy good. Now in the West, you've got St. Louis would play against Calgary. Colorado would have home ice against Winnipeg. Arizona would play Dallas, and Vegas would have home ice against the Oilers. The Oilers pulled themselves into a tie with Vegas, but regulation wins and all that. Vegas is still number 2. Nashville's 1 point behind Calgary, as are the Vancouver Canucks. The Minnesota Wild are 2 points behind Calgary. And Chicago, check it out. Chicago's 5 points out of the playoffs right now. California, all 3 teams. Anaheim, San Jose, and the LA Kings, they're all 7 points out right now. And of the 3, LA might be the one with the best chance of turning it around. I can honestly say of the 3 teams right now, I'm most confident in LA. I didn't think I would say that, but it's more of a discussion of just how far both the Ducks and the Sharks have fallen this year. It's as much that anyways as anything else. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. You're all up to date on tonight's happenings. Thank you guys so much for all your support. We got the power rankings tonight, and then I have to do the preview because we've got a game at 9:30 in the morning my time tomorrow. It's insane. I will talk to you again soon.